Right-Hearted with me, Stuart Wakefield. I'm delighted to have with me today Andrew Drysdale, who's a novelist and has switched to genres. And that's one of the particular reasons I really wanted to get Andrew on the show. So Andrew, welcome.
Hello. Thank you for inviting me, Stuart.
You're very, very welcome. And thank you for accepting the invitation.
No,
Now,
my
listen,
pleasure.
I need to make a public apology to you because you were meant to be one of my very first interviewees. And through one thing or another, I let you down for weeks and weeks and weeks. So thank you for finally coming on. And I'm sorry it was completely on me that all of that fell apart. So I throw myself upon the mercy of the court.
No problem, mate. Fine.
Okay, so how did you come to be a writer?
Well, it all started a long time ago when I was back in the mid-90s when I was working at Dagenham Engine Plant, of all places, and I just had this idea of a story, a short horror story, and I decided to write it. So I literally just had this idea and I started to write it in my lunch breaks in the unlikely setting of Dagenham Engine Plant with the plant machinery going on.
Motor Company, for those who don't know.
For those who don't know, Ford Motor Company. With all the machinery going on in the background, I was in my office in my lunch break writing away and testing it out on people. And that is literally how I started writing. I just got this idea one day about a demon inhabiting other people's dreams.
Right.
And then someone said, you can't just publish that on your own. You have to write another story. And do you know how people talk about cabbages and kings, this, that, and everything else at work? And you can cover any subject. Yeah. I think the film Armageddon with Bruce Willis had just come out. So the subject of Armageddon cropped up in a conversation somewhere. And when I was driving home from work, I thought about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And I thought, I wonder what the horses think about it. So I wrote the second story, The 4 Horses of the Apocalypse. Brilliant. And that's how that came about. But I didn't publish until 2 years ago because one thing led to another. Life, the universe and everything got in the way, as it does.
Yeah.
And so I wrote a third story called The Proxy to pad it out, and I published, and voila, I sold books. And I was quite pleased about that.
Did you have any sort of hesitations in kind of owning I'm a writer?
I did at first because I thought it was a bit of a bloody cheek to write something, self-publish it, and then sit back and say, I'm a writer. That's like qualifying yourself to be a doctor or something like that, Right. I stitched my arm up, I'm a doctor, But I put the book out there. I have sold books. So, no, I am now a writer. I might not be as big a writer as someone as yourself, for instance, who sold lots of books, but I am a writer. Big or small, I am a writer. So.
You are indeed. Yeah. And that book is called Perchance to Scream.
It is indeed, yes.
Okay. And that's very firmly in the horror genre.
Yes. Even the slightly comedic one with the 4 horses is still set in the night before the end of the world. So, yes, it's a sort of Terry Pratchett-style horror, if you like.
Right. And you have a nice little anecdote about your first ever rejection slip for a short story. Tell us that.
I was dead proud. I used to show people my rejection back in the days when you actually got rejection slips from publishers and agents. I used to run around showing people at work that I got a rejection slip, and people said, "Why does that make you happy?" And I said, "Because you can't get a rejection slip unless you actually tried in the first place."
Yeah.
And there are lots of people out there who say, "Oh, I could be a writer," or "I could do this," or "I could do that," but they don't do it. And for me, even as mundane thing as getting my first rejection slip was kind of affirmation that I had actually tried to do it.
Yes, yeah. What would you think gave you that courage to actually wade in and write?
Well, I've written since I was at school. I was always good at, they would say write a 2-page story, about this, and I was always quite good at that. I always got good marks at that. I've always liked stories, and I've got quite a fertile imagination. But I just felt that I wanted to get something out there, so I tried writing some things, and that that wasn't the first. The Perchance to Scream wasn't the first thing I wrote. I wrote several other stories, but
Okay.
my personal criteria, right or wrong, is read it back to myself and think, would I actually pay money to read that?
Yeah.
And if the answer was no, then I would say, well, I'll stop that or change it or just do something else. And I did a few of
Mhm.
those. And then
Okay.
when I wrote Perchance to Scream, I thought, well, actually, I would. If that was in a short story book from somebody else, I would actually pay money for that. And that was a
Right.
personal affirmation that I felt it was worth going out there.
Yeah. And what did it feel like when you sent your first short story off to a publisher?
Nerve wracking. Like
Right.
sending my just born baby out into the world untrained, and they sent it back and they've rejected it. And as I said, at least I tried. But yeah,
Yeah.
sending it out for the first time in the format they wanted it, posting that big brown envelope into the letterbox as you did in
Mhm.
those days was
Yes.
yeah, it was horrible and great at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So so I mean, you and I, we go back quite a long way. I think we
we
met
do.
in the early 2000s.
Yeah, it'd have been that in full credit. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So at the time, I mean, I wasn't a writer. I had absolutely no aspirations to be a writer,
Mm.
and it wasn't really till 2009 when I did National Novel Writing Month that I
Mm.
kind of took on that identity.
Yeah.
Um, but it never came up in conversation, and I do wonder about how you sort of start to adopt that identity of being a writer. And I think it's fair to say in our office it was kind of grey, right?
Yeah.
And everybody got on and sort of did their thing, and you didn't. I think it was very rare that anybody scratched under the surface and found out what it was that other people did. Did you, once you kind of took on that identity of being a writer, did you suddenly find other people were, for want of a better term, like coming out to you as writers?
No, because the only people I ever came out to as a writer, if you like, was
Right.
back in Dagenham Engine Plant when I was
Okay.
writing in my lunch break. And Stephen King had a phrase in one of his books called "falling through the hole in the paper," and I used to do that in my lunch break. I used to sort of dive into the story, and I was gone, and I was beavering away, and then my team leader would throw a balled up piece of paper at my head to wake me up or something, and it would carry on like that. Uh, I decided 3 years ago that you see, like an artist can't just sit there and paint something. You have to be in that space, in that place where you
Yes.
can do something.
Yeah.
And I decided 3 years ago was the time to restart it, kick it off
Okay.
again. So I wrote the third story and published Perchance to Scream 2 years ago. Um, but then everyone around me then knew that I was a writer and I published and they bought my books. I sold books outside of my friend group, which is good
Yes.
because not all
Yes.
your friends buy your books, but it doesn't necessarily make
Absolutely.
you a writer. It just means you've got nice friends. But
Yeah.
um, and because I am sort of retired, if you like,
Mm. Mm.
um, and I wanted something to do. Living in Germany now, as I do, one of the things that I have noticed here is that the Germans absolutely love British crime stories.
Okay.
Yeah, Midsummer Murders is called Inspector Barnaby over here, which is
Barnaby,
why
love
I
it.
believe when John Nettles left, they had to get another Inspector Barnaby for the foreign market, not just for the UK market, because everybody else knows that program is Inspector Barnaby.
Right.
But it's really
Okay.
popular over here. We have Vera, we have all sorts of British crime stuff
Okay.
transliterated into German and everything. Yeah. So a friend of mine said, "Why don't you write a British crime novel and publish it in Germany?"
Okay.
So I thought, that's quite a nice idea. Why not? Um, so, first of all, what I should have done first is I should have invented a detective and then given him or her a crime to detect. What I actually did was I discovered the murderer first. I
Okay.
discovered the criminal first and thought, what if this particular type of person was the actual bad person in the book, the criminal, the murderer,
Right.
the whatever. I thought, well, yeah, that will work. Now, how am I going to catch them? And that's how Jimmy Green was invented.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what I mean, I always think that a lot of the most interesting stories do start with those two words, what if? And I think
Absolutely.
that you said about having a very fertile imagination, and we've seen that in I don't know if you have Disney Plus, but there's a series on at the moment called What If,
No, I
and it is
hadn't, but
about,
yeah.
okay, so what they do is they take established characters. So
Mm.
if you are familiar with Captain America,
Mm-hmm.
um, so that's a character, Steve Rogers, and he's injected with something called the Super Soldier Serum. And in What If, one of the episodes is, what if the British agent Peggy Carter? What would have happened if she got the serum, the Super Soldier Serum
Okay.
injection
Yeah.
instead of Steve Rogers?
Mm-hmm.
And again, you get this very creative, kind of fertile way of doing it.
Mm.
If you're starting with the end based on your what if, how
Mm.
then do you go back and structure a book based on the ending?
Well, if you establish a certain criteria of person as the bad guy or bad
Right.
woman,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, then you have to go into motive. Okay, this person did this thing. Why did that
Yeah.
person do that thing? How did that person do that thing? When did that person do that thing?
Mm-hmm.
And if in the end the person is caught or is stopped from doing that thing, who caught them? Who stopped them? So
Yeah.
you kind of structure. You're quite right. You do structure. I hadn't really thought of it like that, but you do structure your book in that way backwards.
Yeah.
So you go from the villain to and you end up with the investigator.
Right.
But you can't just invent unless the entire story is about just the villain.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have to structure the book around the people who are capturing them,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
I
that is
mean,
how Jimmy Green was born.
okay. So
Yeah.
we often see particularly in drama, the detective always has some issues, and
Mm.
they're normally divorced and they're drunk. They're always kind of falling apart.
Mm.
Did you feel kind of, not pressure, but did you feel, I guess, what
Did I feel as I needed to make him stand out in some way other
yeah,
than just being a detective?
yeah.
Uh, I did a bit, but not too much,
Right.
because anyone who's reached the top of their field in most genres is going to
Mm.
be a standout character for one reason or another. I mean,
Right.
we've seen some people in the places that we've worked. Now
Mm.
they're not normally divorced, hideously ugly, wonderfully handsome, gorgeously beautiful, 6.5 feet tall or whatever, but
Right.
you can usually pick out a defining feature. And the only real defining feature of my main character in this one, he's a bit loud.
Okay.
Yeah, and he dresses well. That's about it. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So
And I
I
mean,
did
this
feel
is
pressure, but not too much. Yeah,
okay. Good. And
yeah.
then, so I mean, were you reading in the kind of cozy thriller genre?
No.
Okay. So how much homework did you have to do?
Well, I've been around a lot of the television series for a
Right.
long time. I've watched a lot of television, and I have read some some books. Not all the books, because you're quite right about the cozy thriller genre. Because
Yeah.
also in Germany, they don't have things like the grittier inner city dramas from the UK. They
Oh,
have them from
okay.
Germany and they have them from
Right.
Sweden, but not from the UK. In Germany, um, they like the typically British or English countrysides type of police genre. They love Vera.
Okay.
They
Right.
love Midsummer Murders, but they don't have Frost, which is all in a city.
Oh.
Yeah.
Do you know why? Like, from your friends in Germany, what it is that they find so appealing?
Well, we all have views of. I'm not being detrimental here. We all have views of what people from other countries are like, what they do, etc.
Indeed.
A very British view of Germany is the Oktoberfest, for instance. And you think
Right.
of the Oktoberfest, you think of large Germans slapping each other's thighs in what's called shoepletler dancing. They still
Okay.
do that. And busty wenches with dirndls serving up large amounts of beer in huge mugs. Is an image that we have, and it's an accurate image, but it's a very small image.
Right.
The image that they have of the British in Germany is that a lot of us live in the country, and a lot of us wear tweed, and we're very polite in our police work, and that is the image they like to see.
Right.
In America, they have CSI over here, for
Yeah.
instance,
Yeah.
so they have the fast, flashy things from America, but less of the slower paced American, because they don't want slower pace from America. They want large, flashy CSI Miami, CSI Los
Right.
Angeles. From
Okay.
the UK, they want the more comfortable, cozy fireside sort of. Yes, I say, old chap, do you mind if I murder you? Yes, quite. Go ahead. Bang. Ooh. Yes, I exaggerate, but the expectations are more countryside than they are gritty, dark inner city.
Right. Maybe I should think about moving to Suffolk and buying a tweed jacket. Maybe my sales in Germany might go up. It's definitely worth thinking about.
Definitely. Do it.
Expect tweed all over my Instagram soon. So,
Yeah.
I mean, so how do you? I mean, obviously, fiction and television are two quite different forms, and I think if you were writing a screenplay, you'd be taking a very different approach
Yes.
than writing fiction. So, if you're not kind of reading in the genre but you're familiar with it, what kind of obstacles did you come up against when you were writing Jimmy Green?
The biggest obstacles for me were knowledge of the law,
Okay.
yeah, and knowledge of some extremely dodgy things. And I hope to God that the German police never look at my internet history, because I had to look at all kinds of horrible things to write a crime novel. One thing I did learn about, I saw a program about police programs
Okay.
a couple of years ago, and they all said practically none of them are accurate.
Okay.
And I looked into that, and I thought, yeah, if it was wholly legally accurate and followed police procedure exactly, I think
Yeah.
any book, television program will be extremely boring.
Yeah.
What it
I
has to
agree.
be is it has to be accurate enough. So I've had to look
Yes.
up some laws, how they're enforced, what the penalties are. And I've also had to look up some horrible crimes and how they're defined in law, and the
Right.
difference between this sort of horrible person and that sort of horrible person. I shan't go
Yeah.
into details, and this is a nice blog. So.
Okay. Listen, I used to work in the Crown Prosecution Service. I was only
Ew.
temping. I was there for
Yeah,
about 3 weeks, but I was working in the mailroom,
yeah,
and we would get evidence sent through to us
yeah,
that we would open, and we'd have to work out which team it went to.
yeah.
And I remember flicking through some of the evidence because I'm nosy,
Mm,
and honestly, the pictures were
yeah,
horrific, and pictures of autopsies, and it's toe curling stuff.
yeah.
And for me, I'm not sure I could stomach that kind of research. Was there anything? Obviously, I don't want to give anything away
Yeah.
because I kind of know who did it. But but was there any part of your research that actually made you uncomfortable?
Yeah, one part which I won't go into too much, but
Right. Sure.
yeah, one part made me a bit uncomfortable. I actually didn't want to know,
Right. Okay.
but to act, and one thing I've tried to avoid in the book is there are clinical details in it, but I
Okay.
haven't gone into the gory details. I don't think
Right.
blood and guts can be implied without having it sprayed everywhere, in my
Yes.
opinion.
Yes.
And
I
so,
agree.
and I've also, I've labelled Jimmy Green as a character who can let forth with some astonishingly bad language, but that doesn't mean that
Okay.
I've spread bad language all the way through the book. I don't think you need to.
Right.
It can be
Yeah.
implied.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the
And
fact
I
that
think it
people,
does turn
yeah,
some. I think it does turn some readers off. So the
yeah,
readers in Germany, are they reading? Are they reading English? I mean, and actually, do you know what? No. Let me back up. So when I worked in broadcast media,
mm,
it was quite interesting. So some countries would dub,
Hmm.
and other countries would go with subtitles because they wanted to hear the original language.
Yeah,
How are our programs that are shown in Germany? How are they shown? Are they
they're
dubbed or are they
all dubbed.
subtitled? All
Everything
dubbed.
is dubbed.
Okay.
Absolutely everything is dubbed, and they're not too hot on here in the untertitles, subtitles. Sorry, um,
Okay.
which is a shame because the German language is difficult. It's difficult for me being older to learn, but I could
Right.
survive if a lot more programs had even German subtitles, but a lot of them don't. But
Right.
all foreign programs in Germany are dubbed, whereas in the
Okay.
UK, almost all foreign programs are subtitled.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you watch a film or a program from another country in the UK, it's almost always in the original language with English subtitles, which is the
Okay.
way I actually like it.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I prefer subtitles
yeah,
too because I find it off-putting when the voice doesn't match the
yeah.
lip movement. It drives
They
me
are actually
potty.
very good in Germany. They will change the scripts so they can match up phoneme shapes with the mouth and everything.
Really?
They're mostly very. Sometimes it's not so good, but for a lot of things, for instance, I've said it before: Midsummer Murders, Inspector
Right.
Barnaby. They
Yeah.
do it really, really well. It's very difficult to see that there's not someone speaking German.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay. I'm impressed. The Germans are
mm,
very good at technical stuff, aren't
they
they?
are.
I'm not being a generalist. I'm having worked with Germans
Mm,
for what, nearly
years.
20 years.
Yeah.
I feel I can get away with saying that. So actually, you've touched upon something I wanted to bring
Hmm.
up. So German grammar is very complex.
Mm,
Things that are capitalized and all of that kind of stuff. And
yeah.
it's a language that I've always shied away from.
Mm,
So the version of Jimmy Green that I've bought is in English.
yeah.
What's the plan? Because if it's for German consumption, how are you approaching that?
For at the moment, it's released everywhere in English.
Yeah,
Translating a book. I mean, you've seen the size of that book, haven't you?
yeah,
It's
yeah.
794 pages. Uh,
Yes,
to actually have that book translated would cost quite a bit of money. It's not thousands,
right.
but it would cost some money. So
Yeah,
what I really need to do is sell some books and finance some translation services later on, maybe.
right. Okay,
And then I can re-release the book in German.
okay. So
Yeah.
what's the or you could farm a chapter out to each of your German friends.
That is very, very difficult. Technical stuff is a lot easier to translate than pages from a novel. I asked a friend of mine who's been a very great help to me,
Okay,
has got a guest appearance in my book. It's not actually
right.
him; it's his name and some of his mannerisms. But I
Okay,
asked a friend of mine to translate about 50 lines just so I could show him what I put in the book. And
right.
she said she found it really, really difficult to translate prose. A business
Oh,
letter is different. That's easy. I mean, I can do that as well. I can
yeah,
translate business letters into German,
yeah.
but actually in prose it's a whole nother ball game.
Hmm.
And I remember listening to a radio program
Yeah.
years ago, 6, 7 years ago, and it was about translating books. And there was a woman there who'd written a book. I can't remember who it was. Kind of not
Right.
important, but she spoke French. But
Okay.
she, as an experiment, asked 4 other people to translate her book into French. And they
Right.
all translated it slightly differently. And they translated it differently to the way she would have translated it into French as well.
Oh,
Mm.
okay. So how would you know you were getting a good translation?
I would ask a friend of mine whose English is good to read both versions.
Okay,
Yeah, so
that's
they would read the
interesting.
English version. They're already reading the English version. If I got a German translation, I would ask that friends to read the German version to see if it actually matched the English version.
Right. Because I guess if you use a particular turn of phrase that the Germans don't have,
Yes, that they will translate it. Yeah,
yeah. Because what's
yeah.
that word that they have that we can't? There is no meaning for
Doch,
us. Is it Schadenfreude?
doch.
I'm
the word doch, D-O-C-H, doesn't have a direct translation.
Okay.
It means sort of certainly, all right, okay, but ja doch, yeah, doesn't have a direct translation.
Okay.
There are
So,
other phrases that we use. I mean, like a phrase for something being very boring is in German. Hier ist tote Hose. Yeah. Now, if you
right.
translate that into English, it says its direct translation is "here is dead trousers." So, yeah, the
So you need someone who kind of understands the vernacular
colloquialisms. Yeah,
to be able to do that. So
absolutely. Yeah,
796 pages, my friend. How
yeah.
how long does that process take? Because I wrote a book that was 300 and something. That
Mm,
was like 4 years. I mean, but then again, like you, it was lunchtimes here,
mm,
commuting to work, that kind of stuff. And I didn't really get into it until
yeah.
I left and became, a full time author and book coach. So I
That
think I
was
left work end of March and that book came out at the end of July. So
yeah.
how long does a book that long take?
Well, that took me 2 years.
Right.
Um, uh, But yeah, if you remember, I asked you about a year ago. I'm getting about 1,000 words a day. Do you think it's enough?
Yeah.
Stuart's Mr. Experienced writer person, and you sent me this great long list back of people whose their different word counts, and some was 500 words a day in 2000. So you said I was
Yeah.
doing okay.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I had actually finished the book in March of this year.
Okay.
Got a friend's, I reread it, corrected all the spelling mistakes, and made a couple of changes for better impact. And a friend of mine also reread it and read over it and went through it. And then we were hit with the floods in July, and
Right.
we are not badly hit, but we did get some flooding and everything. So that sort of like put the mockers on it a little bit, but
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not too bad. But I decided to wait a while and do a proper job than just rather get it out there and keep resubmitting
Yeah.
it to Amazon because I
Yeah.
found more mistakes. So I
Yeah.
thought just leave it for a month or two and then do
Mhm.
it properly when things have calmed down.
Yeah. Yeah.
My next book, the next in the series, I decided to have a little break from writing. I'm now
Okay.
6,000 words into that little break. I kind of couldn't help myself.
I think that's a good sign though, because
Yeah.
I was talking to another author about, um, I took a week off after
Mm.
finishing a book. By day three, I was going like out of my mind because I
Yeah.
wanted to get back and write something else that I had an idea for.
Yeah.
Um, do you, how long? I mean, obviously, I'm really sorry to hear that you were hit by those floods. I
Mm.
know they can be devastating. And, I've had a leak in my house and it took from May to October to kind
Yeah.
of get things, settled. And you've been flooded. I mean, it's 10
Yeah.
times, if not more, harder.
It's
And it
okay.
just does really upend
We had some
everything.
water come through and had to take a floor up, and there's some damp in the walls. And
Right.
I'm pulling moisture out of a room all this time later every day with the
Yeah.
dehumidifier.
Right.
Further down where I live was there was some devastation and that sort of
Right.
thing. But I'm okay.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Good. Good. But obviously, Jimmy Green would have not floated, have settled. With you, you would have had that kind of break from it. What was it like coming back to a manuscript that you'd kind of let settle?
It was good because I was able to take a deep breath and say, right, let's start again. And I just read it from start to finish
Yeah.
and thought to myself, that would have better impact if I moved that from here to there and that sort of thing,
Yeah.
because it's
Yeah.
that old thing. I know exactly what's going to happen. I know how it's going to happen, but I have to make sure I explain it properly so that you know what's going to happen next and how it.
Yes.
So I went through that. One thing that pleased me greatly is that bits that I wrote that were slightly jocular still made me laugh.
Good.
And bits that I wrote, I actually had trouble writing a bit because it upset me because it was sad and the
Hmm.
person was devastated in it, and I felt for that character. And when I
Okay.
reread the book again, I felt sad for that person again. I was sort of wiping away a tear as I'm reading it, that sort of thing. And That might sound odd to some people from, well, you wrote it, but if I find something funny, it should make me laugh. And if I want to
Yes.
make you laugh, it should make me laugh
Yeah.
as well. So
Yeah.
you can laugh twice at the same jokes. But
Yeah. I mean,
I was pleased at that. Yeah.
yeah, I am, I am good. This sounds really bad. I am guilty of coming out of the study and saying to my other half, "Do you know that's a really good book?" Like,
Yeah.
and he's like, "What? That? Like, how can you say that?" It's like because I'm enjoying reading
Mm.
it back.
Well, you
Um,
should do. You should say that your book is good. If you don't think your book's any good, why on earth would you publish it and expect other people to buy it? You
yeah,
must
but I
think your own
think
book is good.
you know that is interesting because I kind of see it from two different sides. So I
Mm.
think it's very very encouraging that you're able to work. I mean, 4 years down the line, I mean, I should have been completely and utterly sick of those people. And there were a couple of times
Mm.
I was like, "Why am I doing this?" And I was kind of getting bored with it. And it wasn't
Mm.
bored with the book; it was bored of the I don't want to call it the monotony, but I guess the routine.
Yeah.
And what I found was I was going over the first few chapters over and
Mm.
over and over again. And what I needed to do was sit back and just read through the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I think for me as a book coach, that's what I get to do. I get to sit down with somebody's work and read it all the way through.
Mm.
And because I read it all the way through, in a week or two, it's all
Mm.
kind of fresh. Whereas normally I take ages to read a novel. But I think a lot of writers do get bogged down and it's so familiar to
Mm.
them that it almost ceases to have any kind of emotional effect. So
Yeah.
I think what you're saying, it's a good sign if it's still hitting you.
Mm.
Um, and I guess it'd be interesting to see how many characters you take through the series. Whether it's just Jimmy Green or you start to bring people back, because I am dead set on bringing many of my characters back, but just in slightly different roles, even though it's someone else's story.
Yeah. Well, the thing with and you read it in other genres or see it on television programs, when you have a squad of police officers, it tends to
Yes.
stay the same. Sometimes you'll lose one and get a new one, or
Yeah.
sometimes the team expands, or maybe occasionally contracts. So my plan is to mostly stick with the same people,
Yeah.
maybe swap a character out, maybe bring a profiler back in after a couple of
Right.
books. The one that was in the first book comes into the third book or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, so I plan to have sort of comfortable stability without making it boring.
Okay. Good. And
Because
I think that's what people like, because it's those differences book to book that kind of hooks the interest.
but the
Okay.
stability that keeps you going with the flow. Because I noticed this especially with some pop groups or even some folk groups from the past, as they start to become successful. So they change what they're doing, and I was thinking, hang on a moment, if it worked before, why change it?
Right.
So if people are
Yeah.
like your books, providing it's not the same story every time, because that would be
Sure.
boring. But
Yeah.
if you've got a set of characters that people like, don't change it. For me, I could be wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess that works in a couple of different ways. So
Mm.
you've got artists. I guess let's look at it from a music point of view.
Mm.
So you've got artists that kind of what you're going to get
Yeah.
when you put one of their albums on.
Yeah.
But then you've got somebody like Madonna who kind of reinvents herself
Mm.
over and over again. And I
Not
guess
always
to a
successfully.
degree, well, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess to a degree, you've reinvented yourself from a horror writer to
Mm.
a thriller
Mm.
writer. How do you? What your plan going forward is to stick with the thriller genre?
It is, yeah, but I could also write some other things. I gather it's rather unusual to change genres.
Um, well, no, I mean not necessarily. I think
Mm.
authors can sort of find their center of gravity
Mm.
after a while, and some authors are very particular about if they're writing in one genre, they'll use one name. If they're writing another, they'll use another.
A nom de plume. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I think that's a branding thing. So, if
Yeah.
you buy this name, you're going to get horror. If you buy this name, you're going to get
Yeah.
cozy British
Yeah. That's probably a
murder.
good idea if I do that again.
Well, but yeah, I think there's that element of, there's things that I've published, short stories, which aren't romance and they don't, have queer characters and stuff. And I do sit back and think, should I have published that under my own name, or should I, have gone some different directions? And almost like, should I republish it under a different name? And I always kind of struggle with it. But I guess if you think you're going to stick in this genre, then perchance to Scream can be a statistical outlier, as we used to learn at work.
Nice statistical outlier.
So what then is? So how do you go from? I mean, I see authors work in different ways. Okay, so they'll start with a character that they think is fascinating. They'll dig into that character and they'll do that character work and then see what stories suggest themselves out of that character. If you're writing, do you call them murder mysteries or thrillers?
I would call it a crime thriller. Yeah.
Crime thriller. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're writing a crime thriller, how do you decide on what your kind of, I call them obligatory scenes. What kind of scenes do you think you have to have?
Well, you have to have a scene of crime. A scene where there is a police squadron where they can carry out their deliberations and have an incident board and a sort of a centre of operations, which usually implies a police station. And you must have witnesses and suspects.
Right. Yeah.
A lot of other things can be character development. Most of those things are the same as every other novel. You in most genres, you have to establish the character, what their motivations are, what drives them, to a certain extent, what their home life is like, that sort of thing. Are they married, got kids, avoided getting married because that's the way they are, whatever. Yeah. But for me, the scene of crime is an important one to get right. The police squadron is an important one to get right. Everything else is character and situation building. Witnesses you have to have. And suspects. You can't just have one suspect. Otherwise, everyone will know who did it.
Yes.
But the suspects you have must be plausible. And I had to really think about this as well. The suspects you have got to be plausible suspects. You can't just pluck someone off the street and say, he looks a bit dodgy, maybe it was him. You've got to have a good reason, which means you've got to establish chains of evidence linking them to that person, but it's not them, because it also can't be the first person you come across. Right. Otherwise, that's 794 pages of whatever.
I mean, I take my hat off to you, because I don't think I could ever write a crime thriller, because I don't think I have the chutzpah to spend the time doing all of that planning and the red herrings and the foreshadowing and working all of that stuff. It seems incredibly complicated. So, you've done your research, you understand all of that kind of stuff. To sit down and mechanically make something very difficult for Jimmy to solve, what was your approach to that?
Well, the first thing was who was the bad guy in all this. And once as I said, I started off with the bad guy is this sort of person. So once you got the bad guy is this sort of person, what did they do and how did they do it?
Right.
And how are they getting away with it? Because obviously they don't get caught the first time, because also that's a very thin book.
Right.
So you have to have something that's very difficult to detect, but not stupid. Because you can invent anything, and that's just bloody ridiculous. It's got to be plausible, and it's got to be genuine, but it's got to be something that can be well hidden unless you know exactly what you're looking for. And of course, it's one of most things you don't know what you're looking for till you find it.
Right.
And that's how you establish the train of the story. One of the most difficult parts I found to write will take you about half hour, 40 minutes to read. It took me 3
Okay.
weeks to write it because it was
Wow.
so bloody difficult to get every tiny little thing in exactly the right place and make it interesting. Because if it was just a chain of facts, you can just put that there at the end. But you've got to make it interesting for you to read. So
Yes, and it's that kind of dissemination of information and constructing it, as you say. When you came back to editing, it was like, well, actually, this piece of information or this scene would be better in this place.
yeah,
So, yeah, and I think there's always that kind of implicit challenge to the reader that can you work it out before my character?
yes, and you must be able to arrive at the same conclusion that I did, but hopefully not too long before I told you.
Yes, yes,
That's the art of that. And I believe if I've written this properly, and other people have told me that I have already, I've already got a request for the next book.
good.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and gonna have to wait a little while, but
796 days if you're doing 1,000 words a day.
I think now I've actually established the characters. The second book can be a teeny bit thinner.
Okay.
700 pages. I don't know. God, I've read Stephen King novels that are thinner, but
True.
Yes, you've. What I lead you up to towards the end of the novel, you must be able to say, "Oh yes, of course," or "Well." You mustn't be able to say, "No,
Yes.
we can't put that. That's ridiculous." And there was
Yeah.
a well-known and popular television program. I shan't name it in case we get sued or something, but right up to the end of the program of the first series, you didn't know who did it. You didn't know who did it, and the evidence was mounting up, and there was missing bits here, missing bits there, and then all of a sudden, the killer said, "I got bored with this," and phoned up the detective on a mobile phone that was missing. And I thought that negated the entire program of detection because
Yes.
the bad guy at the end said, "Yeah, it was me."
Yeah, it has
And
that kind
I
of day.
felt completely let down by all of the work that had gone on before. And I thought, oh,
Yeah.
God.
Yeah, you have all that kind of Deus Ex Machina, like you say, I guess it's okay for the villain to make a mistake, but that shouldn't necessarily suddenly unravel the whole thing. Because if they'd made that mistake at the very beginning, the the book wouldn't have happened. As you say, you've
Yeah.
kind of robbed both the character and the reader of all of the work that's been put in. Because I think there is that implicit thing that the reader is the investigator along with the investigator.
Yeah.
So
you must be working it out along with me. Yeah.
Yes. Now, I've spoken to other authors about writing trilogies, and I fell into a trap writing a trilogy. So I've kind of shied away from writing series. So my book that came out last July, Behind the Seams, my plan is to have characters coming back, but in spin-offs. So sometimes they'll be younger, sometimes they'll be, I don't know, 20, 30 years older. So my idea is to take different routes, take different characters, put them in romances, and then the others are kind of on the periphery, because I didn't want to write something that well, they can't really follow the same characters. I definitely didn't want to do that. But temporarily, I want to be able to move backwards and forwards. If you're writing a series, I guess you've got characters who have an overarching arc, or you've got other characters that are kind of more or less the same. So you could argue that James Bond is pretty much the same in every film. Indiana Jones is kind of pretty much the same. There's not that character arc. So for you, in terms of Jimmy Green, I nearly said Jimmy Greaves because he's just recently passed away.
Yeah,
the footballer. Yeah. But Jimmy Green, what's your kind of plan for him? Do you feel like each book in the series you could potentially pick up and it could be standalone?
Yes. The idea is that each investigation is a new investigation with some
Right,
links to other investigations,
right,
which you could go and which are not necessary for you to know about for this book, but you could go and get
okay,
the previous book if you
right,
want to. Yeah.
okay. So the
So I've
plan is
already mentioned the previous book in the next book. So
right,
yeah,
okay. So your plan is if somebody was going to pick up, say, book three,
yeah,
they'd 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 still get it. They wouldn't need to
it's a
go back and
standalone
read
novel.
one and
Yeah,
two.
no, it'd still be a
Okay,
standalone
good,
novel.
good.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a very real risk of
Oh yeah.
writing yourself into a corner, and I find it quite interesting when I see, you know, web pages and discussions and training courses for how to
Mm.
write a series. It just fills me with dread. so, so when do you think you'll start writing the next book?
I've already started it.
Oh, 6,000.
Yeah,
Yeah, 6,000 words in.
yeah.
Okay. And how have you approached this one? So your first one you started with the end and who done it. How
Well,
about this one?
this one is absolutely fascinating because I know where it's taking place, but I don't know who the killer is yet, and I don't know what their motivations are yet.
Right.
It's very,
Okay.
very interesting. Yeah.
So you're kind of doing discovery writing. Once
Yes.
you find out who it is,
Mm.
how do you think that is going to kind of change your approach to writing? Do you think you're still going to have to go back to the end of what you've drafted and still work backwards?
Yeah, well, I think there will be some amendments along the way because
Yeah.
a lot of advice to authors is if you're stuck on a bit, ignore it, just move past it and come back to it.
Right.
I haven't stuck on anything yet, and there's nothing that I've written so far that needs changing. All I know is that there is a bad person doing some bad things somewhere,
Right.
and Jimmy Green and his team are going to investigate it.
Okay.
The evidence train hasn't even started yet, except for a suspicion. So I'm almost there with knowing who and why.
Okay.
I already know the how. But as I've written, I've introduced a couple of characters, and all of a sudden it's lit up points of reference for me. It's almost like as soon as this character is established, little lights come on in places.
Right.
Yeah. I say, oh, yeah. Oh, that. Oh, that. Oh, yeah. I didn't know that was there. Oh, I do now. Yeah.
Exactly. And it is interesting how characters and plots kind of grow as you're writing through them. And
Mm,
I don't really like the term pantsing anymore. I like the term discovery writing.
mm.
But I think if you are a discovery writer, I think you're kind of setting yourself up for a lot of rework.
Rewrites. Yeah.
How much planning do you tend to do in any of your writing?
Um, I start off with an idea, then I start off with I like names. So when I have
Okay.
a bad guy or a good guy or a newspaper reporter, and I like to give them names, then I can
Yeah.
picture them, then I can picture that person.
Right.
Do you ever do a dramatis personae list to remind yourself of who's there?
I do. So the reason being, and I wrote a blog post about this about having
Yeah.
a series Bible, because, and it's something I picked up from broadcast media. Is
Mm.
I would regularly see treatments for cartoons coming through, and there would
Hmm.
be a relatively thick binder with who everybody is and what
Yeah.
and how, in particular, especially if there's character arcs about how those
Mm.
stretch across episodes.
Mm.
So I had originally planned behind the scenes to be just a standalone
Hmm.
because I've been burned by the whole trilogy point of view. That
Yeah.
no, terrible experience. And sorry to those who are waiting for the third book. I know it's been 9 years. I will get there. I feel like George R.
Yeah.
R. Martin. But anyway, so when I decided that I would do this kind of standalone,
Mm.
well, I'm calling them chronicles,
Hmm.
okay, because I don't think of them as a series. And I might be using the word chronicles wrong. I don't know, but yes, I had to then draw up a list,
Mm.
and I felt really bad because I'd worked with an author who had I don't know, 30 something characters in her first book. And I was like, no, there's too many. And I counted mine, and I've got the same amount, if not a few more. But yeah, I find myself now that I'm having to write down birthdays because now it's important. So if something happens 20 years, if the next book happens 20 years prior, I need to know how old everybody is.
Yeah.
So how are you handling that?
I'm not handling, not doing it. I'm leaving things a little bit vague. Jimmy
Okay.
Green is sort of like 50-ish.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you what his birth date was, and I don't think it's important. He's kind of around that age. Characters are sort of I imply the character's age by their definitions of them, and then I don't
Right.
refer back to it again because I'm not planning the kind of arc that you are.
Right.
So as it's all more or less in the now,
Mm.
then they're all kind of the age they are now. And I know that sounds a bit bland, but they're all most of the detectives are sort of like mid to late 20 somethings, round about
Right.
that kind of age, early
Yeah.
20s, late 20s, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Loomis is 29. That's the only one I say is 29. So when I write the next novel, he'll be 30. So, but
Right.
I'm not
Okay.
establishing dates like that. I did think to myself, I must write a dramatis personae, and I had this wonderful, lovely ordered list of
Okay.
things and people and events. And after about a month, it turned into that heap of bloody rubbish that you see before.
do you know what? I tell you what I did find it useful for is not having too many characters whose names started with the same letter.
Yeah.
So and actually when I was thinking about introducing a new character, I had my alphabetized list of characters. I was like,
All right.
okay, I like a lot of names beginning with L, I've noticed, and names beginning with S and R. So
Okay.
now I look through the whole list. Now I kind of rank, okay, how many other characters have I got? Because if I've got 32, 64, or 64 characters, it's going to get too confusing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I use them for all different reasons. And also I will defend putting birthdays in because I use something called Aeon Timeline.
Okay. Yeah.
So, and you can put dates in relative and all that kind of stuff. But what I did notice was one of my characters' birthdays fell during the novel.
Yeah.
And I thought, actually, if there is a birthday scene, that would give more weight to this event that I was planning. So I've been able to move things around a little bit. And also I've noticed where had a TV series being filmed, I just had to make sure that the right things were happening on the right days of the week and all that kind of stuff, and when it was going to go to air and that kind of thing. So I do think sometimes putting in birthdays can sometimes give you that little push to go, oh, okay, if that's a birthday or an anniversary or something like that, is there an opportunity for me to hang a plot point or a plot device off that? So yeah, that's my argument for having a few things like that. So Andy, final thoughts. What advice would you give to a writer who's thinking about switching genres?
My advice to that would be forget genre. If you have a story in your head, start putting it down on a piece of paper, however you do it. Just tip your head out on paper or your keyboard or whatever.
Yeah.
To a certain extent, from my personal experience, genre hasn't mattered at all. I wanted to write a story in one genre back then, and now I decided to do something different, and I just did it. If you think you want to write a romance novel, write one.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work, well, you tried, But
Yeah.
if you can create and invent a story and you've got a big imagination, you should be able to create something nice as well as something horrible. Well,
I
hopefully people
agree.
can. Yeah.
Yeah.
But my advice would be forget genre. Yeah. Forget genre.
Yeah.
Just get
Yeah.
the story. Just get the story down there. And if it
Yeah.
works, it works. And if it doesn't, change it. And if it still doesn't, well, maybe genre switching isn't for everyone.
Mm.
But just do it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's great advice because I would never discourage a writer from writing whatever they wanted to write, and
Mm.
at the end is when you can think about do I need a pen name? How am I going to change my pitching or my brand strategy or any of
Mm.
those things? So yeah, I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
If you want to write and you've got that burning reason to do it, and
Mm.
you're the right writer to do that, I would absolutely agree with you. That's the way to go.
Yeah.
Andy, thank you for your time.
Oh, thank
I
you for
love
interviewing
talking to
me.
you.
Yeah.
It's always great to catch up with a familiar face. So, Jimmy Green Investigates. Although the seed for this was for the German market, it is
Mm.
available in English for the time being in all markets.
Yeah.
And if you're German, you could get one of many possible translations available
One day. One
available
day.
to you soon.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks again, Andy. Take care.
My pleasure. Good to see you.
And you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.